Welcome to the old-fashioned radio Storytime. On our channel, Whispers in the Dark Tales. Thank you for tuning in. This story is called The Judged. Our stories are with a black screen so you can enhance the atmosphere and immerse yourself in the storytelling experience, allowing them to focus solely on the narrative without any distracting visuals. Closed caption is available too if you want to see the words. Now let's begin. 3, 2, 1. In the heart of a remote, historical, Eerie town, nestled among the thick woods and foggy marshes deep in the south at the turn of the century, there lived an elderly woman named Agnes. Agnes lived in solitude and humble surroundings. She was known for her eccentricities and her mysterious way of life. She was the only left descendant of the old gypsies that once populated the town. She spent her days collecting rare herbs and curiosities from the woods, all while carrying an air of mystique that sent shivers down the spines of those who crossed her path. The townspeople knew her for her magic and what some called sorcery. She once healed a small boy that was dying with infection and a high fever, which left him in a coma. This is their story. Desperate for help, his parents turned to Agnes against all the townspeople's warnings of her sorcery. When Agnes arrived at the small cottage to see the boy, she carried a small dark leather pouch. Its contents included a small stone bowl, a handful of small pebbles, fragments of deer antlers wrapped in a black cloth, an assortment of herbs, a single feather, salt, a small candle, and a single chicken's foot. Agnes asked the parents if they were ready to start. They nodded in silence, not knowing what to expect. Agnes then asked the parents to leave the room as she started her sacred ritual. She sat on the floor and put a circle of salt around her. In the small bowl, she lit herbs on fire, then gently blew on them and let them smolder. The smoke from the herbs gently wafted in the air around her. She fanned the air with the feather and sat in solace, as if to be praying. After some time had passed, she lit the candle and then started whispering into the air. She gently tossed the stones onto the floor inside the circle and sat gazing at them. She slowly turned to the parents, giving a slight nod. She continued her ritual until she was done. When she was done, she wrapped the chicken's foot in the black cloth and stood up. She made her way to the fireplace, which burned with a warm glow, and threw it into the fire burning in the hearth. As the woman collected her belongings and began to leave, the parents stood in fear as they did not understand what had just happened. The father, reluctant to speak and holding his wife close, gently asked, "What now?" Agnes peered straight at the father with her piercing blue eyes. Agnes replied, "And so it is done. Your son will rise with the next full moon." Both parents stood looking at each other, bewildered, as they did not know if it was a mere myth, but they wanted to believe nothing more than their son to be well again. As Agnes started to pass through the doorway to the outside, the father spoke up. "Agnes, wait, how do we repay you?" Agnes replied, "On the next full moon, make a hearty meal and an apple pie to celebrate the season. Your son will be hungry when he awakens. Place a piece of pie in on the porch, and I will come for it once your son awakens." Kindness is a gesture that speaks volumes and is a rarity that many take for granted. Be humble, grateful, and generous when you're able, and do not lay unfair judgments. Live by this and receive many blessings. Agnes then took a few steps out the door and disappeared into the darkness, as if it mystically consumed her. The father turned to his wife. "The full moon is only 2 nights away. There is lots to do." As the 2 days passed, the parents stayed busy, preparing for a hearty meal for their son. The father went hunting, and the mother prepared the home, washed, cleaned the cottage, and gathered goods. The father returned late that evening at dusk, dragging behind him a large deer. He exclaimed to his wife when he entered within earshot of the cottage, "Honey, it just stepped out in front of me and stood there." The wife replied, "You should see the garden. The plants have doubled in size overnight." As they shared their excitement, the father cleaned and dressed the deer as if for a special holiday. As to them it was, they both stayed diligently busy until everything was ready for this meal. All the freshest and best ingredients. In the late afternoon, on the night of the full moon, the parents prepared the meal, even placing good linens on the table and meticulous precision to the table settings. Even a creamer pitcher of fresh fall flowers expressing all the colors of autumn, sat on the table, paying tribute to the changing season and blessings. When everything was done and the meal and settings were ready, both parents anxiously waited in anticipation for something to happen. Some kind of a sign, the father tapping his fingers on the table, staring into the fire. The minutes slowly passed, and it seemed like years. They both paced the floors, and still there was no sign of their son awakening. As the parents started to lose hope, the clock struck 11 p.m. The mother said, "Are we fools for believing in such things?" As she began to doubt Agnes, the father replied, "No, you must believe it. Don't give in to doubt." The mother jumped up in tears as she looked at her son, who still lay lifeless in the bed. The mother started to cry and buried her face in her husband's chest. The father stood there holding her as tears swelled in his eyes too. He whispered in his wife's ear, "Have faith." Just then, as the clock struck 11:11 p.m., the fire suddenly swelled unexplainably, and the light that filled the cottage was enhanced, catching the parents' attention. As they quickly looked around the cottage, they noticed that the moon's light had gently crept through the boy's window and were directly landing on the boy, lighting up his pale face. The boy's fingers started to twitch. Could it be? The boy's face started to show color as the paleness drained from his cheeks. After a few moments, the boy slowly opened his eyes, and he saw his parents standing there. The boy said, "Hello." The parents dove, hugging and holding him, inspecting him frantically. The boy asked quietly, "Why did you let me sleep so long? I'm starving." The parents, overwhelmed with joy, could only smile. The son said, "What's wrong?" The mother wiped the tears from her face and replied, "Nothing, nothing at all." The father quickly said, "Come, let's talk and eat. We have prepared you your favorite meal: venison stew, homemade bread, hand-churned butter, and apple pie." The boy's eyes lit up and he was on his feet in no time. The boy saw the table and all the fancy settings, and his eyes widened in awe. As the three anxiously sat at the table, all smiling with contentment, and ate their meal together, talking about things that had happened since the boy fell ill last spring. How they had a new milking calf and new chickens. As they sat, quickly losing track of time, the father jumped up from the table. "Oh, we forgot the pie for Agnes." The mother said, "Oh yes, you're right." As the two jumped up from the table to get the pie together, they stopped, as the moonbeams were dancing through the window directly onto the pie, as if to be saying something. With gratitude and humbleness, the husband said to his wife, "Grab a basket. I want Agnes to share this wonderful meal with us." The wife grabbed basket, then started ladling hearty spoons of hot stew in a deep bowl. The husband wrapped fresh bread and butter in a towel. The son, looking confused, said, "What are we doing, and why?" The parents, scurrying around, just said, "We are thanking Agnes for helping you." Now the son, looking even more confused, squealed, "The old scary witch from the swamp?" Both parents paused and glanced at each other briefly. "Yes, son, it is wrong of people to judge based on the appearance." Continuing, "Have you ever met her, son?" The boy slowly shook his head. "No." "Then you do not know her to speak about her?" The boy once again silently shook his head. "No." "Okay, then that is that." The boy's eyes widened as his voice quivered. "But the other kids tell tales of her. She scares me, Papa." The mother turned to the boy. "Now up you go. Place the basket on the porch for Agnes. Go now while your father and I clean up. Then you can come have some pie." The boy reluctantly picked up the basket and slowly made his way to the door. He could not see past the small amount of light that peeked outside from inside the cottage. He crept out onto the porch into the darkness. As he set the basket down, his heartbeat pounded in his chest, and he turned to dash inside, overwhelmed with fear. Out of the darkness, where the shadows of the trees danced from the breeze, stepped out Agnes. The boy yelled in fear. His parents standing right there, the boy ran smack into them. The father said, "Oh, hello, Agnes. We are so happy to see you." The son clung onto his father's leg, trembling. The mother said to Agnes, "Please share our celebration feast. Won't you please come in out of the cold and warm yourself by the fire?" She nudged her husband, grab her basket, as she quickly turned the boy and shuffled him into the cottage. The father quickly stepped out onto the porch and grabbed the basket. He then reached his hand out to Agnes in the darkness. "Come now," with a big smile. "We will not accept no for an answer." Agnes's bones did ache from the autumn chill. She took the father's hand as he assisted her up the stairs and into the cottage. The mother quickly pulled out a chair and said, "Here you go, Agnes. Come sit next to the fire." The father came out of the darkness with a homemade quilt his wife had made and wrapped Agnes in it. The small boy peeked from around the corner and observed from the next room. Agnes had never been shown such kindness and was greatly moved by the couple's generosity and gratitude. Everyone always mocked and whispered, said unpleasant things under their breath as if Agnes couldn't hear them. The mother asked Agnes if she would like her food from her basket, and Agnes said, "No, thank you, I cannot stay, but I have been looking forward to that pie." The mother said, "Okay then, pie it is." As the mother went to fetch Agnes a piece of pie, a small voice came out, "Ma'am, I like pie too, but my mama doesn't allow me to have it before supper. You're lucky." Agnes, without turning, replied, "No, son, you're the lucky one. You have very good folks." The small boy emerged hiding and said to Agnes, "Have you ever had my mama's pie? I'd say we're both lucky." Agnes smiled at the boy as the mother entered the room and said, "Come now to the table to have your pie." The boy quickly jumped up onto the chair, his blue eyes wide, reflecting the flicker of the fire and his brown curls of hair framing his face. The mother handed Agnes a piece of pie, but Agnes put her hand out. "Help me, dear, I would like to have it at the table with the boy." The boy exclaimed after a moment, "Yes, please, come and sit with me." The mother said, "Very well then, Agnes, you're always welcome at our table." As the father came through the front door with an armful of wood, as the mother said to him, "Have a seat, I am serving the pie." The father added a log to the fireplace and came and sat at the table with Agnes and the boy. The mother soon reappeared with pie for herself and her husband. Together they all sat and talked about Agnes's wisdom and the moon phases, the soil, seasons, and harvest. Agnes was wise beyond her age. After they had all finished their pie, the boy said to Agnes, "Thank you, ma'am, for waking me up." Agnes looked at the boy and replied, "I did not wake you up. Your parents did by believing." With that, Agnes announced she needed to get back home. It was already late. She had some things she needed to finish up while there was still a full moon. She thanked the family for their hospitality, and her and her basket made their way out the door and vanished into the darkness. The next morning, when the family awoke, the morning beams lit up the cabin with a sense of peace. The boy's laughter once again filled the air, and his inquisitive questions came one after the other. The garden had doubled in growth overnight. The animals had produced more milk and eggs. The hunting seemed to keep the stone house full. The family was truly blessed. They often sent an invite to Agnes, inviting her to dinner and holidays, and she gladly came for the pie and even helped teach the boy about the soil, plants, how to read the sky, and when to plant and when to harvest. The moon phases, and how everything comes to be. Agnes spent her days giving her wisdom to the boy and his family until the day she passed, all while the family reaped her knowledge. The boy loved spending time with Agnes, listening to her tales and experiences. She became like a grandmother to him. The boy even offered to accompany Agnes to town and assist her at the market. The long stares, cruel whispers, and cross scowls to Agnes and the boy as they walked along the cobblestone streets went unnoticed by them both, as they just went about their business. The boy and Agnes paid no mind, and over time the stares and glances stopped, and more people in the village started to speak to Agnes rather than fear her. She was often smiling when her and the boy were together, which did make her look not so scary. The boy was always just happy to be alive. Agnes's generosity given to the boy and his family in their time of need was returned to her 10 times fold. Agnes was grateful for the family and their kindness. The values and lessons they all learned goes without saying. After Agnes's passing, a lone raven often came and made itself known before flying back into the forest. The family believed it was Agnes checking on them from the beyond. One of the first things the boy was told by Agnes and his parents was, "Kindness is a gesture that speaks volumes and is a rarity that many take for granted. Be humble, grateful, and generous when you are able, and do not lay unfair judgments. Live by this, and many blessings will fall upon you and your family. And one more thing. One should be so fortunate to have the ability to have pie before supper. The end.